Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And a warm welcome to you all. And for all our, actually I should say, not only our tape listeners, radio listeners, but our YouTube listeners. So, we hope you're all well, and we do be thinking about you. Lately, we have been reading and thinking on the book of Genesis, and I thought I would sort of bring it together and see what we have learned from this book and what it all brings to us. It is a book of beginnings. That's what Genesis means, beginnings, and it is written and compiled by Moses, covering some 2,369 years. It's quite a bit of time, from Adam to the death of Joseph. It is a very interesting book, and it's filled with every type of emotion. But what can we say we can learn from it? Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 29 says, God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. We have been creating idols in our hearts. Now, idols are anything that we pursue with the intensity and the commitment we should be having for God. If we push God to one side to pursue anything like education, family, career, or pleasure, we abandon God just as the nations of old. From Adam unto now, every sin imaginable has been committed. Committed and repeated over and over and over again. When I was thinking about this, I thought suddenly about the 7 deadly sins. Do you know, you would never hear of anybody speak about the 7 deadly sins. And I suddenly thought to myself, I haven't heard that since I was a child. Well, the 7 deadly sins are pride, covetousness, lust, anger, greed, envy, and sloth. Now, there is an awful lot of that going on today. But when you think of Adam and Eve, they really had everything going for them. They lived in paradise. They were educated by the Lord Himself. They were well taught in all aspects of living and working. Can you just imagine walking in the garden and it be dark and seeing all the stars and them all shining bright and new? And I'm teaching them all the planets and the constellations and everything you can see, and tell them that I name all these stars by name. I know each one of them. That was something. Like, it's just mind-boggling to think what they were like and what they had. And even to be the first parents of mankind. But theirs was the first sin, was disobedience. You can hardly imagine, you know, with all they had, that they would even think about disobeying. But that's just how subtle it is, and it creeps up on you. And it still is that way today. Disobedience. But Adam, after all that, and he was put out of the garden, must have thought to himself, he was angry. He was angry with himself. He was angry with Eve. And he was angry with God. Because he said, this is the woman you give me. She made me do it. So then he blamed. So that's today. We put the blame on everybody else. As I say, you have all this management, and there's so many managers, so you have somebody to blame it on. You know, so nothing's changed there either. But I'm sure Adam could have kicked himself over and over and over again, many a time, when he went through the life that he was living then, from then on. It was harder for them. He had the sweat of his brow, he had to till the ground. So life wasn't very easy for them. And then Cain displayed the same type of sins. He had pride, because when he was told, that's not good enough offering, that's not what you were supposed to do, then he got his back up. And he was angry. And then he envied his brother because his sacrifice was accepted. And then he turned to murder. Well, I guess he repented. Whether that was for his own good or not, it says that, anyhow, if you put this mark on me, then everybody will kill me. So he probably was very sorry that he did, even for his own brother too. But it doesn't tell us a whole lot. But our Lord is still communicating with this first family. And they were suffering. They were suffering regret, their loss of their freedoms, and they were suffering sadness because they had lost a child and they'd lost a brother. And then we get to Seth, whom God had given to Eve for the third son, to replace Abel. And then from Abel and his son then on, Enosh, they started to walk with God. So people had sort of come back and sort of said, we're not doing things right here. And he started to do right. So it goes on down through. Because in Genesis 4:26 it says, at that time, from Seth on, men began to call on the name of God. And they began to obey God. So off and on, down through the time, there was people who walked with God, and then there was lots of other people who didn't. And by the time we get to Genesis 5, we're down to Noah. And sin was so prominent in the land that it had to be destroyed completely. But when I read about what Lamech said, Noah's father said about him, he must have seen something very good in Noah. Sometimes you can look at a child and say something that's there, that maybe they're going to be something important or do something good. But he said when he was born, this one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. So they were still suffering the curse of the land, right down to that time. And right down to our time too, even worse. So obviously they thought maybe Noah would do something good or change things because he walked with God and he was what we would class as a good man. But they didn't think that God was going to destroy the whole land from underneath them and take him and save only Noah. So that good that was in Noah actually saved him and his family. And then Noah became the second father of the earth because Noah pleased God. But you go down to Abraham then and Sarah, and you see more of the 7 deadly sins too, or else. They lied. Now, some people say it was only half a lie because she was his sister. But from God's point of view, they didn't trust God to save them out of their predicament. They used themselves to bring about the change. How often do we do that? We haven't the time to wait on God's time. And then his nephew Lot, that he was suffered from greed. And you go to Sodom and Gomorrah, and it was destroyed because of its evil deeds, the depravity of the people. And you get down to chapter 16, and we find Sarah giving her maid to her husband for to get a surrogate child. Now, what always amazes me is nearly 99.9% of the time, men will not obey their wives. But here, you give them their maid, and they obey you immediately. And you instead of sort of saying, Sarah, catch yourself on, This is not how it is. God said he'll give us a son. He'll give us a son in his own time. But what does he do? He obeys her. Then they have a child. Then the trouble starts. You see, every time we go against God and his good timing, we create problems for ourselves. You get down to Isaac and Rebecca, and she showed the trait of pride. She saw this handsome man walking in the garden and was told, that's your future husband. So she lights down off her camel and covers herself all up and says, right, I've had a bad hair day. You're not going to see me in this dirt and grime, so I'll wait till I get all cleaned up before he sees me, right? But at the end of the day, it is a form of pride, and we all have it, especially women. I think it's inbuilt. But again, Abraham sends his servant to go to get a bride for Isaac. And on the way, that servant prays to God and believes, because his master's faith in God that it would happen. This servant then has this faith in God. So you see, the influence of Abraham had on his servant, that he would believe that God could send him and do it. So we do be an example to people, and that was a good example. But one thing that really amazes me, that but just before Abraham actually then, Isaac had other sons. It said he had Ishmael, the surrogate one, he had Isaac, and he had 6 other sons. So you sort of think Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, and that's, they all had 1 son each. But there you are, he had 8 children, probably besides girls maybe as well, we don't know. But the one thing about that family was they were not equal. He didn't treat his sons the same as Isaac. So he gave them all presents, these 6 sons, and sent them far away with gifts. It's no wonder that there's probably troubles in the Middle East and all these things when they're handed down, because if it's like our country, it perpetuates on and on and on and on. And I guess people do not forget. But the amazing thing was that God promised descendants to Abraham to fill the earth, and then he gives 2 men, Abraham and Isaac, barren wives. It's just amazing. Here they are. Isaac had to wait 20 years before his son was born. Now it was because the husband and wife then had to entreat God for them. But why? Was he teaching them patience or endurance? Was he just teaching them to trust me? It will happen. And sometimes when we wait for something and have to wait a long time, we really appreciate it far more than if we got it immediately. And then we have Isaac and Rebecca had 2 sons who seemed to even to have issues before they were even born. But I was thinking about it, and that continued on until they were grown up. But when you think of it, it said that Esau was a hairy baby, a very hairy baby, and Jacob was a smooth baby. And you could just imagine that in the womb, rubbing up against each other. He probably tickled them to death. So when you sort of think of it, it's, well, they had conflict all their days, I dare say. But at the end of it all, Esau, what did he do? He obviously was his own man, and he did what he liked. He married 2 women from the Hittite family tribe, which was a grief to his mother and father. So when Jacob deceived his father into thinking that he was Esau, now When you think of it, Jacob was a liar. Whether we like to use the word or not, that's what he did. He lied to his dad. And he deceived him. And he went along with his mother's deceit. Because even though he was reluctant to do it. But Rebecca did know that God had told her that Esau would serve Jacob. And it might have been whenever she saw that Esau went and married the Hittite women, and he wasn't following what their wishes, that she preempted God and went ahead. And that might have been her trigger for to do that. And she intervened and brought the timing in her way, not in God's way. Now we all do that, don't we? But God was working with Jacob, and through all his troubles with Laban, he learnt what it was like to be deceived. Because Laban deceived him and manipulated him over and over and over again. And he suffered for his part in the deception of Esau. But he repented of that. And he says, look, I've had enough. Let's go home and meet Esau. I'll just go home and say I'm sorry. But he was afraid of him. But what really stands out is what he did then. He had a trait. He put the maids and their children first in the front line. And then he put Leah and her children behind Daddy Cain, and Rachel and Joseph, whom he loved far more than any of them, he put last. Now, what on earth would that say to a woman and her children? That's what you call favoritism. It's no wonder he had trouble. But Esau was a much more loving and forgiving and generous man than the rest, it seems. And he was really glad to see Jacob, and ran and met him, and fell on him and kissed him and hugged him, and it was all over. Now, then you go down to Joseph, and the story nearly all starts all over again. Because Joseph was envious. The brothers were envious of Joseph. But Joseph had a lot of pride, and a wee bragger, and told them all his dreams and what all he was going to do, and until they sold him, they just got rid of him. But God was working with him for a purpose too. And he was used to save Egypt. He was used to enlarge Egypt, to make it a great nation. And he was used to save a lot of people, other families and nations from starvation. And when you look at in Genesis, there's quite a lot of famines. And we think there's sort of a new thing here when you hear famines, but they've been happening all the time in that area. But again, they are what we would call an absolutely dysfunctional families. Now we read there chapter 49 of Genesis, where Reuben, unstable, defiled his father's concubine. Now in the biblical text of that is, what he did was he raped or sexually assaulted her. That goes on all the time nowadays. Simeon and Levi were cruel, self-willed and angry men. We have Judah. Judah was praised because Judah was prepared to sacrifice himself for Benjamin. When all came to it, he would give up his life to protect Benjamin. So he had much more compassion in him. Zebulun was going to be a haven, a port in a storm. Looks like Issachar was a lazy and slothful person. Dan, deceitful. He was cunning as a serpent. He was sly and sneaky and underhand. When you read all them words and you put them into modern day language, it doesn't change much, does it, in our day and age? Gad Well, he was going to be triumphant at last. Asher, bread and dainty morsels. I wonder is Asher's bakery part of that tribe? Still producing dainty morsels. Naphtali was lively and with uplifting words. He was a pleasant person, obviously. Probably a good man too. Then you have Joseph, who was so badly treated, received great blessings and was a blessing to others. Benjamin, it says he was a ravenous wolf. He devoured and divided. Well, when you read his story, he almost got his whole tribe wiped out because he allowed the rape and death of a Levite's concubine to be murdered, and he did nothing about it. Now, we have that today. We have people murdered every day of the week, and there's nothing really done about it. Nothing concrete. You throw them in jail and then you think, maybe they've learnt a lesson. Let's let them out again, and they go and do it again. There is no lessons learnt. But anyhow, the Levite had a better idea. He wasn't going to let this go unpunished. He cut her up and sent her all the way to all the Israelite nations, who gathered for a clan meeting. Decided, they should have given the men up so that they got their just deserts. But they still wouldn't, so they sent them word, and Benjamin wouldn't give them up, so they went to war on them, wiped out most of the men. And then they had to sort of rearrange, juggle. It's like the Brexit affair at the minute. They had to juggle to see how they were going to get husbands for these wives that were left. So that's a whole story in itself too. So you see, the story of Genesis has shown us the good, the bad, and the indifference of man to his creator. God destroyed the earth. He destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of their sin. Are we really any different here today? Like I say, murder is committed daily. Multiple murders. It's not only one, it's all over the earth. In fact, I believe in England, around the Midlands area, there's about 8 a day. Now, it's a bit mind-boggling when you think there'll be 8 people murdered a day, and you never hear of them. So what have we learned from Genesis? Because man is still the same, almost 6,000 years on. Man has not learned that sin does not make him happy. And the deadly sins are deadly. But God continually works with those who respond to him, and is still merciful to those that don't. Just as there was at the beginning, just as there was a beginning, so there will be an end to this earthly story. Because God says, my soul shall not always strive with man. He is continually evil in his heart and resists the Holy Spirit. The Lord will bring an end to this earthly realm, and as we know it today. He tells us that he will send warning signs so that man would know that he is the supreme God of all things and will complete his purposes. God does not take pleasure in bringing disasters on men, but until man's back is against the wall, he will not do anything about it. He continues just as he is. Now we live in precarious times, and there is no cohesion amongst the nations. There's harsh words said, and undermining undertones and overtones make politicians look weak and vulnerable. And And in these circumstances, they can be taken advantage of. And we are told to pray for these people, that we might live in peace and harmony. Actually, the God-fearing people that walk with God are obviously not doing enough, because we do not have peace, and there is no peace anywhere. We have monsoon rains in India where there's 300,000 people misplaced, have no homes. It's just unbelievable to watch all that piece of land just slide away and houses down into it. 300 people dead, probably more. Italy's bridge falling down and killing 38 people from shoddy work. There's fires and earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. Australia has such drought, it could be looking at famine. If Noah was the only righteous man on earth in his time, it's mind-blowing. So, how many righteous people will God find on this earth when he comes back, really? If it was in the same scenario as when before Christ came, probably wouldn't be any different. We are told in Matthew 24:4, there will be a great tribulation, unmatched from the beginning of the world until now, and never will be again. There are some, we'll just read from Matthew 24. Matthew 24. Right, it says, verse 12, it says, because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. We have that today. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. And the the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and the end will come. And if you drop down then to verse 21, it says, for then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless the days should be shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, these days will be shortened. So you see, it tells us that there's going to be false Christs and false prophets arrive to deceive the people. So people are going to be deceived as well. They really need to turn to God. And it tells you next in the next chapter about the 10 virgins. 5 wise, 5 foolish. These are Christian people. These are not unbelievers. These are people, 5 that are not. Half the people is not going to keep up to date with walking with God. It is going to be a horrible time for us all. Because when you think of it, in Genesis 4 and verse 9 it says, the voice of your brother's blood cries out from the ground, from below the ground. Now God knows when anybody's murdered, for each one is murdered, and he still grieves over man's ugliness. But as it is today in Judges 21 and verse 25, it says, in those days everyone did what was right in their own eyes. We live in that method of today. Everyone does what's right in their own eyes. Everyone takes what they like out of the Bible. They interpret it to suit the situation. And so therefore they think they live in a peace with God. God doesn't believe that. When he says everyone did what was right in their own eyes, it certainly isn't saying they did what was right in his eyes. And there's very few people walk with God. Very few people down through that few thousand years that walk with God. What have we learned from Genesis? That human beings are the same the world over. We don't learn by mistakes of others. We don't believe God would destroy all the earth in the past or in the future. You know, the Bible is just stories. I've heard people say that. Oh, it's just a story, you know. The men down through the years just put it together, you know. And you sort of think, wow, you know. But what we have to learn is that even those people are the same as we are. There is absolutely no difference in what the people of today was to the people of that time. Except those that walk with God has God's Spirit. But the thing is, God worked with certain people out of that group. God's still working with certain groups of people in this day and age. He can take somebody and he can, even though they go against him, even though they preempt him, even though they don't do it his way in the beginning, and they jump ahead of him, he still can work with them. He can bring them around, and he produces his purposes for each one of us in our lives. Well, it does tell us there, as in the days of Noah, in that Matthew 24 and verse 35, and I'll just read it. It says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. But of the day and the hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man be. So, God's just going to come back someday, and we just have to be ready to receive him. We have to be sort of saying, oh wow, I'm glad to see you. And only those that walk with God that's going to happen to at the stage, in the first stage. Now God does have a plan for mankind, for all mankind. But if you want to welcome your Saviour back, you better be up there right front. Because the Lord will return. So we do not need to be deceived as Eve was. And we don't need to let any of these 7 deadly sins, and many, many more of them, there must be hundreds of them now, claim your crown. Because the Lord will return, and we have to be ready for him. So thank you, and God bless.